Hi everybody, it's me, the second coming of Man, Man 2, and welcome back to yet another video about video games. Something that I used to focus on quite a bit back when I first started this channel was licensed video game tie-ins. You know, silly little games we could play as a low poly version of Bruce Willis. Sometimes they're good, most of the time they're not very good, but I've always enjoyed seeing how developers adapted our favorite movies, TV shows, books, and cartoons into video game form. There's just something kind of cool about controlling these characters we already know and love, and throughout most of the 80s, 90s, and noughties, there was an almost unlimited choice of video games that fit this bill, and it's incredibly likely you owned or played at least a few of them. And when it comes to the PS1, this is absolutely one of the best consoles out there if you're looking for silly and interesting licensed video game tie-ins. And in the past, I've made videos looking at a whole bunch of them. All the Disney games, all the Marvel Comics games, all the DC Comics games, all the Star Wars games, and even some standalone videos like those two weird Men in Black games, Small Soldiers, Pingu the Snowman. Literally anybody could get a game on the PlayStation. I mean, they gave Westlife a game for feck's sake, and one of them wanted to fistfight ISIS. And while this channel has pivoted somewhat into covering the more culturally relevant PlayStation games like Bubsy 3D, to be honest with you, I kind of miss playing licensed trash. That really is the heart and soul of the Seanson experience. So I figured in between these longer videos that I like to make, why not put out some shorter videos looking at the wide range of silly licensed games that the PlayStation has to offer, almost like a grab bag of sorts. There's no rhyme or reason for picking the games that we're looking at today. I've just chosen 8 games at random from the incredibly vast PlayStation library, and we're going to talk about them because I'm a responsible adult and this is a very good use of my time. Also, since we're talking about licensed games, as is tradition, these are the videos where I appear on camera for some reason. I'm not really quite sure why. I mean, I don't really make the rules. Actually, no, it says here that I do make the rules. Who wrote this? I wrote this. What? Alrighty, so just to recap, the premise for this video is pretty simple. It's 8 PS1 games chosen at random by myself. The only criteria is that they have to be connected to an existing property in some way, shape, or form, be it a TV show, movie, comic, book, board game. You know yourself. And if you know this console's library, you know that there are a metric fuck ton of video games that fit that bill. And while I don't expect any of these games to be classics, it is always nice to find a game that can subvert expectations or is either so bad that it ends up being incredibly funny. So either of those is preferable. So let's kick things off today with the debut game from a much loved developer, and definitely one that I didn't just pick, so I had an excuse to play the cartoon's theme song. That's right, it's one of the many American cartoons made to sell toys that had an absolutely banging theme song. It's Skeleton Warriors, the debut game from a little company called Neversoft, who you might remember for introducing the world to Goldfinger, Bruce Willis, and the Rasta remix of the Spider-Man theme. So, in the 90s, a fresh-faced Neversoft was tasked with developing a video game tie-in to the new cartoon/toy brand Skeleton Warriors, which was about a bunch of cool people battling skeletons in the future. I'm sure there's more to it than that, but you don't need to convince me. If it's got a skeleton, I'm already in. That's literally how they sold the PlayStation to people back in the day. I mean, who are you to resist these lads? Originally developed for the Mega Drive and then cancelled and reworked for the Sega Saturn and later ported to the PlayStation, this 96 release is a classic 2.5D scrolling hack and slash run and gun platformer thing that features a mixture of pre-rendered sprites and 3D visuals. It's a great example of an early 5th gen game, which is to say the gameplay is nothing you wouldn't see on 16-bit consoles, but the visuals, audio, and CGI cutscenes, this is where the next-gen elements come into play. Also, it runs at 60 FPS, and we love to see it. Unfortunately, being a pretty old-school game gameplay-wise, and also being connected to a brand that didn't exactly fly off the shelves, it basically meant this game kind of got overshadowed by lots of other fully 3D games out at the time. But looking at this game nowadays, this honestly is a lot of fun. The core of the game is really just running through these mostly linear levels, wrecking skeletons, quite A lot of skeletons in all shapes and sizes, skeletons that get progressively funnier and weirder as the game goes on. I mean, we've got cowboy skeleton, six-armed gun skeleton, boxing skeleton, this cool little guy in the back throwing grenades. Everybody loves him. The main gimmick, I guess, is that the skeletons regen if you don't pick up their dropped crystals upon death, and these crystals are also used as ammo for your projectile weapons, which straight up feel kinda shinobi-like in action, which is always a good thing. And it's also got these weird little speeder bike sections, which are a bit manic, but definitely playable. And also the music is real good. Apparently it was composed by Tommy Tallarico, which means I'm going to get a lot of comments asking me if I watched the H-Bomber Guy video. And yes, I too am on the internet, but whoever did it, the music and audio here is pretty damn good.
This is great banter. It really is.
So yeah, Skeleton Warriors, this was honestly a nice surprise. It can be a little bit hectic in places, and it's certainly not Neversoft's best game on the console, but for fans of side-scrolling action titles and skeletons, you really can't go wrong with this one. Our next game, however, despite being very similar to Skeleton Warriors, you can certainly go wrong with. God, remember DragonHeart? If you're around in the 90s, you probably do. A very bizarre and silly fantasy adventure starring Dennis Quaid and Sean Connery as a dragon. If you can believe it, they also made 4 more of these things, with the most recent one coming out in 2020. Why? Because people love dragons. So naturally, it also got a video game tie-in that also appeared on the Saturn and PS1 from Norwegian developer Funcom, and despite sharing some similarities with Skeleton Warriors, you can almost immediately tell from the gameplay this here is a very different beast, and a slower, more methodical, janky beast at that, but it does have a lot of dragons, so, you know, you gotta give it credit for that. So DragonHeart here honestly feels like the weird love child of a CDI Link game and Sub-Zero mythologies, which on paper sounds like the kind of combination that could cause the world to implode on itself, although luckily I would say that this game is somehow more enjoyable than both of those games, if you can believe it, although that being said, it's still not very good at all. Now the fighting here is kind of FromSoft coded, it's slower, you've got a stamina bar that you need to manage, you can roll around, which is always fun. The issue though, as you can probably tell however, is the very, very rigid controls, and the need to master these often rigid controls or face severe punishment. Sometimes you think they're okay, and then you get caught between a swinging log and a hard place, and the game slowly embarrasses you until your inevitable death. It's really quite something. Also, there's lots of instant death pits, you know, lovely stuff. That being said though, I did find this game more enjoyable than I expected it would be if you can get used to its controls. There are some rather interesting elements to its combat. There's these little areas you can seek out in levels that reward you with permanent buffs or new abilities, and you can even get some attacks that use fighting game inputs that actually wreck opponents. And you can also do this little backstab that costs a lot of stamina but gives you extra money for using it, which I thought was kind of fun. And I legitimately think this game on a visual level is pretty fun for a digitized sprite style game. Like, this is a funny looking video game, and there is a lot to see, from enemies to bosses to setting people on fire and also calling down a dragon to set people on fire, and there's even FMV style minigames that require quick inputs and have some really funny death scenes. See, this is bad, but it's also kind of hard to hate. Like, I've played many games in this style and they're almost never good, but I at least think this one was trying some fun new ideas, and it's nowhere near as punishing as some of them out there. I'm looking at you, Sub-Zero mythologies, and above all else, the game is legit kind of funny. I would put this on the good side of the bad game spectrum. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're willing to mess about with it and learn its quirks, I think you'll get a few laughs out of it at the very least. And honestly, setting dudes on fire with a big dragon, that really never gets old. And by the way, speaking of dragons, Well, if it isn't Advanced Dungeons & Dragons Iron and Blood Warriors of Ravenloft. Not only a game with a very long name, but also the only Dungeons & Dragons game on the PlayStation, if you can believe it. There was a port of Baldur's Gate in the works that was unfortunately cancelled and then leaked on the internet many years later, but that never officially came out, so we're stuck with old Iron and Blood here, which, believe it or not, is a D&D fighting game, and also one of the worst fighting games I have ever played in my life. Now, to be fair, a lot of the early 3D fighters that weren't Virtua Fighter or Tekken aren't very good, and even the ones that we did like back in the day, like Toshinden, don't really hold up all that well, but Iron and Blood here is very, very rough. At a basic level, the combat here just feels so unrefined and sloppy, and even the simple act of trying to get your character to face the other character can be an ordeal in and of itself. Like, I can think of no other fighting game that at least functionally plays like a basic 1v1 fighter, where your character can just stop facing the opponent at any moment. I mean, what is going on here? Released in '96 from Take-Two Interactive, the actual D&D aspects and inclusions in this thing I really quite like. I mean, you have a roster of characters representing good and evil, and a whole bunch of different races and classes being represented. Outside of the basic 1v1 fighting, the main draw here is the campaign mode, where you pick from a selection of fighters and you choose one from your team to fight another member of an opposing team, with each of the characters leveling up and gaining new abilities and items whenever you win a battle. But each character also has a limited number of lives, so if you lose too much with that character, then you lose the character permanently, which I thought was a novel take on the whole team battle formula that you'd normally see in fighting games, but with some D&D flair thrown in. And to the game's credit, the different classes do have a variety of weird and interesting moves that you wouldn't usually see in 3D fighters at the time, and when you see the moves in action, it's probably for good reason. It's just the visuals, the unstable frame rate, the janky combat, the limited combos, the weird camera angles, and the whole not being able to face people thing. It just makes for a frustrating game, even if you do learn its quirks. And trust me, I did try. I would even go as far as to say that this might be the worst 3D fighter that I've played on the console. I mean, there are still folks out there saying Star Wars Masters of Terrakasi is the worst fighter on the PlayStation, and believe me, that game is light years ahead of D&D here. Although the ideas that are brought to the table and the D&D-isms that are tried to implement would make for a fun fighting game in the modern age, I think. So here's hoping somebody out there can revisit and expand upon this concept someday, just with, you know, good fighting gameplay. Anyway, that's enough violence and dragons for now. Let's pivot to something I know you're all excited for: games made for very small children. And I say, hey, what a wonderful kind of day, if you can learn to work and play and get along with each other. Oh my god, what a banger. Did you know Bob Marley's son Ziggy Marley sang that tune? You know, somebody out there got really high listening to this and had a absolute blast, and it definitely wasn't me. Anyway, here's Arthur Ready to Race, the lone Arthur game on the console, based on the much-loved series of books and the PBS animated series that's full of great memes like This Sign Can't Stop Me Cause I Can't Read, Angry Arthur Fist, and also that episode where Arthur punched DW using said fist. All classics. Now, Arthur Ready to Race, you would assume is a racing game, right? And it kind of is. It's actually more of a selection of mini-games based around a downhill racing competition, but there is racing in it, so I'll give it that. This was released in the year 2000 from Runecraft Games, who, if you're a sad adult who plays too many PS1 games for children like myself, you'll be all too familiar with. Now, the goal of this game is to basically win a downhill racing competition by building a race car of your own from several different parts and then competing in said race. The downhill racing is pretty much what you'd expect, a rather simplified racing game with no accelerate button and also no opponents on the track. You pretty much just have to steer and brake and also try to collect all the bionic bunny cards that you can, which, as far as I can tell, do absolutely nothing, but you know, collecting stuff is fun, so why the hell not? Once you complete a race, you then get to walk around Arthur's neighborhood in Elwood City looking for people to help out, and if you do help them out, they will give you a new part to upgrade your downhill racer, and then you do a different race and, you know, hopefully win that too. Now, these mini games are competent but very, very simple, like picking tomatoes in a garden, avoiding ghosts in a little haunted house part, or helping find your baby sibling because your mother's just not arsed doing it herself. But luckily, she does have a steering wheel handy to give you as a reward, so clearly her priorities are on point. Now, at first I thought this game is kinda boring, but it is competent and, you know, harmless. It's a game for young kids, so who am I to judge? But after doing the second downhill race, which was mostly the same as the first downhill race, and then completing the exact same set of 4 minigames again with almost no changes, and then completing one more race with very little changes yet again, the game just ended, and that was that. It was basically like playing the Rugrats PS1 game, but if there were only 5 minigames, and none of them were as good as anything seen in the Rugrats game. And by the way, if you're wondering if the Rugrats game will show up, I'm saving that for a Nickelodeon themed video since there are plenty of Nick games on the console, so be patient, you will get your time. But yeah, this is honestly pretty low effort on behalf of Runecraft. Sure, it's competent gameplay wise, and sure it has some nice graphics and parts, but young kids and Arthur fans deserve better than this, I feel. It doesn't even feature the Arthur theme, which is absolutely crazy. So yeah, if you're inexplicably looking to give your young child a racing game for a console from 1994, Arthur Ready to Race is not the one. But that doesn't mean we can't keep looking. Well, would you look at that? It's the Smurfs, and they've got go-karts for some reason, which means it's time to race. Now, I have a complicated history with the Smurfs. I don't think I've ever bothered to watch or consume any Smurfs TV shows or movies in my lifetime, because honestly, I'm not really that enamored by little blue guys, unless their name is Tobias Funke. But one of the earliest gaming memories I have was playing the Smurfs game for the Sega Mega Drive, and for whatever reason, this forest level early on into the game freaked me the fuck out as a kid. The combination of this angry plant and all these evil Smurfs, I don't know what it was, but I was just terrified by this game. I think it was just seeing these supposedly good characters portrayed as being evil. I think I had the exact same reaction to seeing evil Buzz in that Toy Story game, or learning that the Green Ranger was evil. I don't know, just some mild childhood trauma, you know yourself. Anyway, here's the Smurfs Racing, also known as 321 Smurf, in PAL regions. Now, promisingly, this game was developed by Behavior Interactive, aka Ass to Mouth, who developed a whole bunch of other well-liked licensed tie-ins, that Jersey Devil game, and also Dead by Daylight, which is still pretty funny to bring up. And would you believe it, this right here is the perfect example of a mid-ass licensed tie-in, which is to say it's very playable and competently made, but it's neither very good nor very bad. It is quite simply a decent Smurfs kart racer, and assuming you're in the market for a Smurfs kart racer, well, you know, this game should be good enough. Now, once again, this game kind of simplifies things for a younger audience. You have the usual array of weapons and pickups that you'd expect from a kart racer, but also all of them have their own dedicated buttons for activation. So there's a button just for using your forward projectile, and also a button dedicated to your rear mine. And for shields and boosts, well, these just activate automatically upon pickup. So it's all quite straightforward, really. There's also this wind-up mechanic, which really just acts like a checkpoint timer from arcade racers. And while you can jump, there's no drift mechanic in this game, meaning the kart races really focus more on braking than, say, something like Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing, which ironically means the skills that you'll learn from this game will probably set you up better for playing something like Gran Turismo or Colin McRae in the future, which I guess is handy if you're a child. Like I said, it's all very competent, yet very, very average. My biggest issue really is just the lack of content in this thing. I mean, there are unlockable tracks and characters, but after one run through all the tracks, which takes a little under 40 minutes, I had everything in this game unlocked. And while it was fun enough and there's a little battle mode that you can play around in, nothing here was really good enough to make me want to play this game again over the dozens of other better kart racers available on the console. However, if you did end up with this game as a kid back in the day, you probably would have had a good time with it all the same. And like I said, if you were a Smurfs fan, a decent kart racer is probably all you could hope for. Anyway, since we're smurfing, we might as well check out the only other Smurfs game on the console, which I didn't even know existed until I made this video, so that probably bodes well. That's right, it's the Smurfs, and since this game is a platformer, I can now use this to get over my previous platforming Smurfs trauma, which, believe me, I really do need to get over. Now this time around, we have a game developed by French studio Helio Games, who would later go on to be known as Doki Denki Studios, a name you might be familiar with thanks to their work on some later Disney games like Tigger's Honey Hunt, Peter Pan Return to Neverland, and that weird piglet game where he gets trapped in Silent Hill. And honestly, this Smurfs game right here, pretty damn good actually. It's a rather straightforward 2.5D platformer that I would say takes most of its inspiration from Donkey Kong Country, which isn't a bad thing at all. The goal of this game is to help rescue Baby Smurf, who's been kidnapped by Gargamel, and you move through a series of nice, visually distinct levels, almost all of which have their own unique little gimmicks to play around with, and enemies can also drop these potions, which give you new abilities per level like double jumps, dashing, and roll attacks, which can also play into the design of each level, helping to keep things fresh, and each level also has 3 hidden moon tokens to seek out, if you like hunting for collectibles. Once again, this isn't a game that blows me away or anything, but it's just such a nice, cozy little platformer, and graphically it's really quite pretty, especially this one level where you're riding around on a rabbit. Like, this is a vibe right here. I guess it's not a surprise when you consider how good Tigger's Honey Hunt both played and looked. Like, I think that game might be the prettiest of all the Disney games on the console, and while Tigger's Honey Hunt had some mechanics I wasn't really too fond of, the Smurfs here is just a really straightforward, well-made, and cozy little platformer that you can play through in about an hour. And even if you're not a Smurfs fan, if you're simply after a stress-free platformer to kill some time, I really quite like this one. Well, I say stress-free, but Gargamel's castle and the boss fight at the end is, well, it's a fitting last level and boss fight, let's just put it that way. Interestingly, I also accidentally discovered that there was a whole section of the game that I initially missed on my first playthrough. Basically, when you start, you get a choice between what I thought was easy and hard mode, but hard in this game is the platforming campaign, and easy is in fact a tutorial slash minigame collection of sorts where instead of rescuing Baby Smurf, you just do minigames using the platforming controls and gimmicks, but instead to collect bottles and sweets for Baby Smurf, which you can then feed him to make him happy, which, you know, as a way to ease you into the game's mechanics and controls, is really quite a novel and sweet way of doing things. Honestly, yeah, this was another pleasant surprise, and while not an A tier or even B tier platformer, I had a really lovely time with the Smurfs, and you can tell the people that made this game certainly put in a lot of effort, so yeah, what more could you want? Anyway, moving on from the Smurfs and good platformers, it's time to talk about one of my all-time favorite TV series, which sadly also has one of the all-time worst platformers. Okay, so if you don't know, one of my all-time favorite shows is Sabrina the Teenage Witch. If you grew up in the UK or Ireland during the 90s and didn't have satellite TV, most of the time as a kid you'd be watching Nickelodeon, and UK Nickelodeon was very weird. It was a mixture of the classic Nick shows like Rugrats, SpongeBob, Kenan and Kel, but also UK exclusive shows like Renford Rejects, random American shows like Saved by the Bell, sometimes you had anime like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Card Captors, and probably the most popular show on UK Nick back in the day, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which I absolutely adored, specifically the first 3 series, which was when the show was at its strongest, but I love all these characters: Sabrina, Salem, Hilda, Zelda, Valerie, the Quizmaster, Harvey Kinkle. I mean, I say this Harvey line to myself all the time just because of how weirdly he says Pokemon.
Wait, Clarence! You dropped your Pokemon cards.
See? How could you not love this guy? Anyway, as a noted Sabrina, PS1 and 3D platformer fan, you would think having these 3 things combined would be a match made in heaven, but oh no. Sabrina the Teenage Witch, A Twitch in Time is a 2001 budget release from UK developer Asylum Games, who also made a bunch of other licensed tie-ins which are not very good and will likely appear in future episodes of this series, but generally Sabrina here is often considered the worst of the bunch. Now, to its credit, it does feature the voice talents of Melissa Joan Hart and Nick Bakay, the only 2 Sabrina characters actually present in the game, as they somehow break the fabric of time and need to travel through 4 different time periods to restore it. It's basically low budget Crash Bandicoot 3, Warp Room and all, but you do get to wear time specific outfits, so that's nice. Now, I'm all for low budget Crash Bandicoot 3 with a Sabrina skin, but this game has all sorts of problems. Level design that's essentially copy-pasted from one area to the next, backtracking which offers nothing interested and is only really implemented to pad out the game, a whole range of spells that effectively do the exact same thing, that being stunning enemies so that you can spam your zap attack to finish them off, animals who are invincible and also move a hell of a lot faster than you do, boss fights which are also copy-pasted and are incredibly easy, and also one of the worst cameras that I've seen in a 3D platformer. It legit got stuck in a gap at one point, and since I had no way to turn it around, I inevitably just had to fall into a pit to my death, which is actually kind of funny. Also, Sabrina's run animation is absolutely terrible, but similarly, also quite funny, and actually does the movement in this game a bit of a disservice, as Sabrina herself doesn't control all that bad on the ground, but the jump in this game is so heavy and hard to judge that it will be responsible for most, if not all of your deaths in-game. Now this is undoubtedly a very bad and low-effort 3D platformer, and also not a great Sabrina game, but I will say it's not a nightmare to play through. I mean, it's bad, but it's not Barbie Explorer tear your hair out bad, and I'm at least a big enough Sabrina fan to meander through the game and hear all the Salem and Sabrina voice lines, which yes, do get repeated very often, but they did at least try a little bit. Also, since the game was made in Europe, the soundtrack kinda goes hard, as is tradition, so that's always a plus.
Look out, bad guys, icicle. Ooh, I like it.
So if you're a Sabrina fan, should you get this game? Absolutely not, unless you find it for next to nothing and are just morbidly curious. Luckily, there does exist some decent PC games and also the legit very good Game Boy Color games from Way Forward based on the Sabrina animated series. So Sabrina fans are at least covered somewhat in the video game department. Anyway, moving on from one of the worst games in this episode, we have saved the very best for last, and it's from a series that rhymes with Sabrina. So that's convenient. Give it up for Xena, Warrior Princess, the cool, campy, fantasy adventure beloved by lesbians everywhere, and who could blame them? And luckily for the Xena fans out there, she also got plenty of games, and I think this PS1 entry here is undeniably the best of the bunch, and also a perfect reference point for what I consider a good licensed video game. I don't think many of us expect perfection when it comes to these titles, especially during the early 3D era. A lot of the time we're just looking for a fun video game that knows its audience and lets us live out the fantasy of being the characters in the show that we love. And Xena on the PS1 knows its audience and is pretty much a perfect representation of the show's appeal. I mean, Xena not only beats the shit out of everybody and looks amazing while doing it, but we've got silly chakram ricochets, tons of screaming just for the sake of it, enough backflips and cartwheels to make Lara Croft dizzy, and of course, plenty of fun cameos and Easter eggs that fans of the show will love. And above all else, I think this is the first video game to feature a controllable disc projectile, which is basically the only reason anybody played Dark Sector, and no shade to Dark Sector, that is a pretty fun game. But Xena here, she is the visionary. What can I say? The game itself is essentially a 3D action adventure with the odd bit of platforming and some puzzle solving, but most of the game plays like a 3D version of a simple arcade beat 'em up, with a button for weapon combos, a button for kick combos, and these can both be augmented by holding down the run button to access new abilities as well. And while the combat here is kinda janky, it's what I would consider an acceptable level of jank for a PS1 game. It looks a bit silly at times, but it's fun, frenetic, and the animations are pretty damn good for a PS1 game. And there's also a dedicated input for kicking lads in the dick, so that's pretty cool. The game was developed in-house by Universal Studios, and I think coming from the same production company who made the TV series, it really benefits the game, as you can tell it's a very authentic Xena product made by people who knew and loved the show. Also, you get to see these great low-poly versions of Xena and Gabrielle in the cutscenes, who not only look very funny, but these cutscenes are legit also just funny in general.
Over my dead body.
So be it.
Yeah, this is just a fun little game that I think even non-Xena fans would enjoy. Most of the issues just come down to the prevalence of that PS1 era jank, as I mentioned, but if you're already used to that, and I know a lot of you are, you'll be in for a pretty good time with this one. It has a little over 20 levels, with each one taking around 5 or so minutes to run through, so it's a great little pick up and play game for shorter sessions, and if what you're seeing on screen looks like your jam, seriously, do consider giving this game a try. I remember enjoying it back in the day when I first played it years ago, but playing it again for this video, I think I like it even more now. It is legit quite impressive, especially if you play other worse Xena games after this one. Seriously, play a few minutes of the PAL exclusive PS2 Xena game and it will make you yearn for PS1 Xena, and also that funny shark where if you hit it a bunch of times, a surfboard comes out. See? Now this is gaming. Well, there you go, that was a look at 8 random licensed video game tie-ins for the original PlayStation. And what did we learn today? Well, not a whole lot really, but at the very least, we learned that Skeleton Warriors, the Smurfs, and Xena Warrior Princess are games that are very much worth your time. The others, however, not so much, but DragonHeart was at least pretty funny, so it's got that going for it. And yeah, that's the video. Like I said, I was just trying to think of some smaller video ideas to sort of plug the gaps in between these longer projects that I like to work on, and this just seemed like the best of both worlds. I get to highlight some games that normally wouldn't fit into these longer projects, and I also get to indulge in my hobby for silly licensed video games. So hopefully you enjoyed this style of video. Also, I know there was no calf footage during this video, so here, have some bonus calf footage just to round things out. I've recorded this voiceover before shooting the footage, so I have no idea what's going on, but I'm sure the girls are being really cute. I mean, look at them there. What a great bunch of cats. We love to see them. So yeah, let me know in the comments, did you enjoy this type of video? And if so, what licensed games would you like to see pop up in future episodes of this series? I already have a massive shortlist of games ready to go, but I'm always down to hear new recommendations, be they good or be they bad. I'm sure at this stage you know that my expectations are pretty much non-existent, so I will literally play anything. Also, I'd like to give a huge shout out to my lovely Patreons for helping me to inflict videos like this upon the world, including fine folks like AC502, Alan Caslin, Alias McDoe, Bleeding Cart, Brendan Hess, Clumbums, Danny, Dave Nolan, David Rodriguez Madrian, Discun, the mascot for the Famicom Disk System, Doma, Etchy Gamer, Fragile Traveler, Gigazol, Globe99, Ice Light, Jared Bynum, Jumbo81, JR Hurd, Karuran, Kyle Winter, Life Sword, Mr. Papala, Mihal, Moomin Biscuit, Trans Rights Are Human Rights, Mr. the Joshmon, My Pal Robot, Nathan McMullen, Nick Norman, Pika Foop, Richard Kramer, SN Kierstead, Cyeno, Sean Slater, Spectre 117, The Friendly Chocoball Bird, Kioro-chan, Tolkoto, Will Savoy, and Zark, who have all subscribed at the Fan++ tier. And finally, I'd like to give you at home, or wherever you are, a huge thank you for watching this video. I sure do hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, maybe you can throw a like or a subscribe my way if you're feeling up to it. YouTube is currently in the process of negging me all the time and telling me that people don't like watching my videos anymore. So if you disagree with YouTube and want to stick it to the man or the weird ominous computer that overlooks my videos, you know what to do. Either way, I'm still going to be doing what I love, which is talking about silly old PlayStation games on the internet for the enjoyment of others, while I sit here in a really small room during incredible heats with very poor ventilation. You know, as God intended. I'll be back in the not too distant future with a much chunkier video next time around, but until then, take care of yourselves, look after one another, and I'll talk to you again real soon. See ya!